All right, let's move over to a game that had a ton of points, a lot of them on the Baltimore side. We opened with John Harbaugh's dancing. The Ravens destroy the Miami Dolphins, and Lamar Jackson, Jay, all but locks up the MVP, 18 for 21, over 300 passing yards, the 5 touchdowns, really the standout in this one.
Yeah, Lamar currently on DraftKings Sportsbook. He is minus 20,000 to win MVP. That is phenomenal value. The minus 20,000 because it's there's
Free.
a 0% chance, I think, now that he loses the award. And look, the criticism of Lamar's MVP case previously had been that statistically he doesn't stack up to other MVP winners or even some other quarterbacks this season. Well, he fixed his stats pretty well in this game, going for the 5 touchdowns, perfect passer rating, 95.9 QBR. And this was against a Miami defense that quietly has been a top 2 defense in the back end of the NFL season. Well, not anymore after this game, but I mean, the fact that he was able to do this, I mean, I think this is probably the best game he's ever played in his career. And this is a guy who previously won MVP unanimously in 2019.
Yeah, Matthew, for a player that it was kind of up and down fantasy-wise, the Ravens have always been good this year, but up and down fantasy-wise, at least the first 70% of this season, what a finish for Lamar Jackson, who probably gave a lot of fantasy managers a championship.
He was the number 1 quarterback in fantasy throughout the fantasy playoffs. Absolutely a brilliant performance by him down the stretch. And, of course, when you need it the most in the championship week, he gets you 5 touchdown passes. I mean, he led one of my other teams to a championship where the rest of my team just didn't show up, honestly. You know, like my running backs in that league were like Rashad White, who didn't do much as well. And, like, you know, it just played against a guy who started the Texans defense. He got a ton of points out of it. And anyway, but Lamar bailed me out with 5 touchdowns as well. A brilliant performance by him as well. And to your point, Jay, like, he is, you think about the 2019 season when he won the MVP. I think it's not a fantasy note, but I just think it's kind of interesting. The 2019 season started with Baltimore absolutely rocking Miami, just blew them out and sort of started off Lamar's 2019 MVP campaign. And then he, of course, ends up winning the MVP. And then this year, he caps it off with a throttling of Miami. So, sort of kind of interesting symmetry right there, sort of fun. But, yeah, brilliant performance by Lamar. He is the MVP of the NFL. And I think you can argue, you know, given his performance in the fantasy playoffs, he's on the short list of fantasy MVPs as well. I mean, I think you could make an argument for Amon-Ra. You could make an argument for, you know, some of the Raheem Mostert if he hadn't missed the last week because of where he was drafted. You know, but we'll do our award ceremony probably in a week from now. But really, a truly brilliant performance by Lamar, especially when you needed it most against Miami. I think Baltimore's the best team in the AFC. I think you can make an argument they're the best team in the NFL. And I think anything other than a San Francisco-Baltimore Super Bowl, I don't want to say it's an upset, but would be a surprise, at least to me.
While it's looking like Lamar will be the MVP, Isaiah Likely might have been a savior for many fantasy managers, Matthew. As soon as Mark Andrews goes down, Likely obviously a huge waiver priority ad that week, and he lived up to expectations and came through this week with the 2 touchdowns.
At least 18 fantasy points in 3 of the past 4. You saw it right there. If you were watching, you saw this play, which is just absolutely brilliant. A one-handed in motion, like he's running and just grabs it with one hand while without breaking stride. I mean, that's what's ridiculous. We've seen a lot of one-handed catches in the NFL. I don't see a lot of them where you just do it while you're running. Unbelievably, he's now scored 4 touchdowns in the past 4 games since Mark Andrews went down. To your point, he is the 5th best tight end in fantasy football, Isaiah Likely. It'd be super interesting to see what happens with Andrews next year. My expectation, obviously, is he's back with the Ravens, and so Isaiah Likely becomes the new Alexander Madison for years behind Dalvin Cook, which is like the rare insurance tight end where if you draft Mark Andrews next year, you'll have to draft Isaiah Likely because if Andrews goes down, you know he exactly will be, you know, come close to matching the production of Mark Andrews. And it's rare that you see that at the tight end position. And if anything were to happen to Andrews, he leaves, he gets traded, what have you. This injury is more serious than we think. He doesn't start the season. Isaiah Likely has proven, you know, he's a top 5 fantasy tight end on Baltimore when he gets the opportunity.
Jay, a brutal day for the Dolphins. A good day for De'Von Achane, over 100 rushing yards. He catches 4 passes, also catches the touchdown. No Raheem Mostert, of course, in this one. No Jalen Waddle, and it's expected that Waddle will not play against the Bills for the division this week. I mean, what do we make of this Miami team right now? And if you are playing in a fantasy championship this week, what do you even look at with this offense?
Yeah, I mean, it was such a weird game because if Tyreek Hill just catches that ball in the end zone, which he catches 100 times out of 101, then they're up 14-7 and they're favored to win the game. And then after that, it just all fell to pieces. Tua didn't play well. They just couldn't get anything going after that. And obviously the defense got completely eviscerated. But, I mean, I think it's positive on Achane, the fact that he showed that he could take 18 touches in the offense and deliver. And he gets in the end zone as well. But, I mean, they're 3-point dogs at home to Buffalo on Sunday Night Football. And I think that there are concerns with Tua's health. He'll play, but he might be a bit banged up. Tyreek just hasn't looked like the same guy exactly since he hurt his ankle or re-aggravated against Tennessee. So, look, if you are playing in Week 18, you're still starting the marquee Dolphins. But Raheem Mostert's health will say a lot about De'Von Achane's upside.
Yeah, and Matthew, Mike McDaniel wouldn't really even comment on the status of Mostert right now. I think he was surprised he wasn't ready to go for this one, and they also don't know his status going into next week yet either.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were all a little surprised. Like, we knew he was hurt. He'd missed a lot of practice, but we thought it was sort of kind of veteran rest. This is somebody who has been banged up in his career, and so I think there was a bit of a surprise that Mostert was not able to go Championship Sunday. I tweeted this out. I was in 5 finals, and Mostert was on all of those teams. Not surprising. I mean, anytime you get almost 20 touchdowns out of a late round pick, it'll do a lot for your fantasy team. I had a lot of Tank Dell this year as well. And so both those guys, to your point, were both on my team in our show league and in a lot of other leagues that I had. And so, you had to sort of scramble there. Justice Hill proved to be a good pickup for him. Specifically to Achane, though. He's had 2 games where forget Mostert for a second. He's had 2 games this year where Jalen Waddle is out. And he's averaging over 37 fantasy points per game in those games. Now, obviously, that's skewed a little bit, but still, I mean, 23 fantasy points this past one against a very good, very good Ravens defense is nothing to sneeze at. Christian McCaffrey, Kyren Williams. That's the only 2 running backs that have had more 100-yard rushing games than De'Von Achane this year, which is crazy to think about, especially when you think about how much time Achane missed earlier in the season. So I think Achane is a must-start this week, regardless of whether Mostert is back or not, because without Waddle, they will use – it's such a narrow offense in terms of how they distribute the ball. Achane is still going to touch his. You mentioned the passing game work, 4 receptions, 30 yards, and a touchdown in this past one against Baltimore. I would expect similar numbers next week against the Bills, regardless of whether Mostert's back.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.